So to get started, in terms of today's conversation, I decided to use a bit of an acronym just to, give structure and add memorability to things. If you know me very well, I'm not very big on acronyms, but I know they do help some other people to ensure that, they get going. And so the first thing I've seen that people do or seen people demand to earn your trust virtually or remotely is that sometimes you're working with team members who are either new or were new at the time that you started working remotely with them. And there's a timeless principle, trust has always come from openness. A lot of times we mistrust the other person or the other party because we don't really know what their intentions are. We don't know what to expect from them. They do things in a bit of a closed, underhanded manner, and that's a cause for distrust. So transparency, the whole concept of being open has always been very important in actually building trust. But now because we're not in the same room together and we're not closer to the situation, we're working from our isolated venues, transparency has become even more of an important in this day and age. In fact, one thing you might have already observed is that there's a lot of anxiety out there from people not knowing what to happen. People have seen solid companies disintegrate in the matter of months and companies close down. And so what your teams are demanding from you is for you to be constantly communicating with them what's happening, whether things are going well, whether there's progress, whether there's that. So that constant communication becomes very important. And so I'm going to invite a couple of people just to share their insights with regards to transparency. What are you doing in your own organization to promote transparency? How would you rate the level of transparency in your organization? I don't know, Edmo, are you in a position to share some insights in that area?
Thank you very much, Frank. If I hear you well, you would want me to share on aspects of my experience with regards to transparency within the organization. I'm going to be deliberate in my response to that question by focusing basically on the issue of communication. And I'm looking at the instance of my team. So I have a team of middle managers, some 5 of them who I work with, that have a reporting line to myself. One thing that I cannot overemphasize is the issue of communication. So even as the situation unfolds, as we go through the various lockdowns and the implications thereof, it's just being upfront with the team. Team, this is where we are. At the moment, because of the lockdown, not all of you will be able to come to work, and these are the implications. Then you get to hear people's concerns, but maybe at times you don't get to hear all of the concerns. So this is for my immediate team, the ones that are immediately below me. Right. For the greater team, I then have, these are their subordinates and their subordinates. I then have a town hall meeting. And over the past year, I think we had some 3-4 odd town hall meetings. And essentially, this is just to allay their fears, but at the same time, make it very clear that there is so little that the organization can do. And particularly with matters to do with safety, that a person needs to take care of themselves as much as possible. And one way that I've always shared with them concerning the COVID, and I think it's a common preventive measure, behave as if everyone that you're interacting with has got COVID, including me, and you don't want to get it from me. And behave as if you've got COVID and you're responsible enough not to want to pass it on to somebody else. So now there are so many, there's an array of issues with regards to that, and it's usually a more challenging team to deal with. But at the end of it, it's then telling them, in as much as I would want to shuttle you from work to your home and take you from there, it's not practical for the business. We will do the best that we can. So I think over and above what I've just been explaining really is the issue of communication. And that way you will have people who do not quite like what you say, but at the end of it, it also manages their expectations. Thank you very much. In those many words.
Well, and I think that is very clear, and I really appreciate you being transparent. And one of the best ways of being transparent is through the way you communicate. And I love the concept of town hall meetings because it gives people an opportunity to ask questions. And when they ask questions and you are able to, in the best possible way, give them the answers that allay their fears, they learn to trust you. And even though Edmo's situation may be such that in some instances he's dealing with some on-site workers, the same is true with your remote workers. And like we say, transparency has always been a timeless principle in as far as building trust. But right now in these uncertain times, people are looking at you as a leader to give them more certainty, to reassure them. And when you communicate and you provide platforms where people can openly share their ideas with you and communicate with you, that will enable your team to trust you a lot more. So that's the first point that we're going to discuss this morning, that we've discussed this morning. The next thing is you've got to be reliable. Now, reliability, in my view, is really going to be one of the biggest things. Like I said, a lot of times, you know, distance makes a big thing. In fact, I was reading on Forbes an analogy that, you know, building trust with your remote team is like being involved in a long distance relationship. And when you're in a long distance relationship, it actually works. It can work. It just takes more time, right? And so one of the things is people from a distance are trying to pick up signals. Just like in a long distance relationship, I would assume that you rely on video calls and whatever you see. In fact, if you've got a voice call, maybe that helps a little bit more than having a chat conversation. But if you've got a video call and you can see how this person is and how they're going about their life, it almost helps you trust more what the person is doing. And so one of the key concepts when building trust with your remote teams is it's more important now more than ever to be reliable. And there are two aspects to reliability. Firstly, it's being able to do the right thing. It's a competence issue, right? And the second thing, it's it's a credibility issue, a dependability issue. Can I depend on you to deliver results? And people right now are looking at whenever you say you're going to do something, do it. Do it. And that's how people learn to trust you. They're no longer there to see certain things for themselves and see certain contexts to what you're doing for themselves. And so they want to look at for someone who they can depend on, someone who they believe that their skills, you know, results, give people confidence that things are going to go well. Like I was saying earlier, we already know that we've got giant companies or companies that have existed for many years shutting down. So any form of non-performance can give a little bit or can add to a little bit of uncertainty and get people to almost not really know where to stand in terms of trusting you to lead them through whatever it is that you're going through. So that reliability is very important. And Nick, I don't know if you want to share some insights based on you know, some of your observations and some of the work that you've been doing in terms of reliability. Is there something you'd like to contribute?
I'd love to, Frank. Thank you. I'd like to contribute something to one of the two aspects of reliability, namely competence. And I'm actually wondering if you see this the same way, if you agree with this. But this competence, at least in my experience, that's really competence in people management. People do not necessarily, in my observations, look towards their leaders for technical acumen. Some teams work way better to have one expert on the team and one leader on the team. Because people who are with great technical competences aren't necessarily great with other people, aren't necessarily great people, team leaders aren't necessarily good at mitigating team fears. So that's one of the major things I've come across. That competence often boils down more to, at least in my experience, to soft skills than to hard skills.
Right. Well, and I would definitely agree with that. I think people are not necessarily looking for the answer from you. Maybe all they need is your guidance to say, you know, where do we get the answer? In fact, they don't really care about where you find the answer, but it's how resourceful you are in helping them figure out the answer or supporting them in actually helping them get the answer themselves. So that's
exactly.
Yes, that's very important. And thank you so much for sharing that. So the whole concept of being competent and being reliable in a certain situation, which is what we're really talking about. I mean, you could look at it from those two perspectives, being dependable and being competent. That's the foundation. That's one of the key foundations of trust, because people are able to say, you know what, this person knows what they do. They've got the competence to take me where they can, where they need to. And not only do they have the competence, but they are also able to show up when the need arises for someone to show up, so that we can make things possible. And that is how, you know, just be more reliable. Be more reliable than you've ever been, especially if they've not met you. Again, they aren't those physical aspects for people to actually build trust with you. But the more reliable you prove yourself to be, they have no reason to trust. In fact, I like to always say that every time I meet a new person, they start off with a full cup, 100% trust from me, somewhat, right? And they almost give me a reason not to trust me. So for me not to trust them. And so the more you're reliable and you demonstrate reliability, and the more consistently you do it, the more I get to trust you. So that's another observation that I've certainly made during these times. Then the third thing we're going to discuss is unity. Unity. You see, there's something about a leader that brings people together. There's just something about a leader that brings people together. And even though we are not, and there was a common adage that was being shared during a lot of our lockdowns, that we're not socially distancing, we are physically distanced. And so when you're working with your remote team, it's important to understand that differentiation. You are not socially distanced, you are physically distanced. And so bring up the socials, have those town hall meetings. The other day we were talking, I was facilitating at a company, and we were talking about happy hours. And they were saying, oh, because of COVID, we've not been able to do a happy hour. And we were talking about, but you guys have certain people coming into the office, and there's a certain capacity allowed. You could buy beers. And in fact, I've also been to deliver a keynote at one of the local business schools in South Africa. And instead of a buffet, they are pre-packed almost food packs to aid with that distancing. So it's important that you keep that social element going on in your organization. And that's how people learn to trust you, when you're available for people. Sometimes when you're absent as an individual, people start to speculate. And so when you promote events where people come together and they're able to see that, you know what, I may not be with this person in the same room, but these people are here and we still have the same relationship. When you foster that unity, people find that there's reason for you to actually there's reason for you to trust them. But more so, and more importantly, there's an element of people backstabbing one another, especially if you're in HR. You'd know that these days a lot of people come to you to report issues that maybe their manager did or anything of that sort. And so if you are seen as a unifier, a unifying force, someone who is often there to actually bring people together and not set people against one another, that kind of behavior enables trust. In fact, if you do the opposite, if you're promoting if you're promoting factional behavior or anything of that sort, what will happen in this virtual age is that people will start losing reason for trust. So in fact, I think Stephen Covey wrote a book, The Speed of Trust. So the speed of building trust in a remote environment is very slow, but the speed of losing trust is actually very fast because people are isolated. And that is why when you bring people together, you almost maintain everything that you have. It's difficult to build that trust. And so it's important that you do whatever you can to ensure that you're not doing things that allow a disintegration of trust in no time, which can then have a serious impact on ultimate business performance. So that's another thing, that whole unity of purpose and bringing people together. It's another very important thing that I would like each and every one of you to consider. And James, I don't know if you've got insights with regards to what have you seen with regards to that idea of promoting unity?
Thanks, Frank, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
To be honest, Frank, I'm trying to find my feet here. I'm a bit lost as to what are we discussing, but nevertheless, I'm enjoying this session. So I'm just gonna carry on listening and hoping to learn.
Okay. All right. No, thank you very much. So maybe just—
If you don't mind, I believe I have something to add.
Yes, please go ahead, Nick.
Thanks. Like, I don't know if there are people here who work in a programming environment, like in one of these agile environments. I have a lot of friends who are, and there I see people having a lot of meetings, multiple meetings a day, every day. And I'm trying to get these people to to communicate more effectively, to get them to spend less time in front of their screens. But what I really want to say is this exercise of making sure we can add a social aspect to our interactions with each other. Don't go blindly into that. It is not, most certainly, it will not be the easiest thing on this list to accomplish. Why? Some people are very isolated from each other and have a very high need to do so. But there are other people who have way too many Zoom meetings. Adding a meeting just to have some social interactions, yeah, it will make some people go mad. It will piss some people off. Excuse my language. So do not think that this is an easy exercise to make. It takes you got to think this through first.
Right. And I think you're right. You know, what I've actually observed is that sometimes half a day working virtually almost feels like a full day of work. So it's important that you manage your team's energies and you're not having too much meetings that will bring people together. But it's also important that you don't remain quiet, you stay in touch with your team. And I think for me, one of the key things that I found is that not all your meetings should be serious work meetings. Have time for fun meetings. Sometimes break out from these video meetings that are quite exhaustive. Have a teleconference, if you are able to do that, where you dial one another and you speak yourself, and maybe people have away from screen time chances where they are able to relax together. Or I've been in an environment where they've hired someone who does virtual yoga. or online Zumba dances. And this is a way of helping these remote people and this there to actually come together and learn how to decompress. I think if I worked in corporate, I'd really appreciate that because I don't really know how to relax. And so this is quite a nice scheduled hour or 30 minutes where people actually not only come to distress together as a team, but they also get to almost connect with other people and laugh at how other people dance, especially if you've got two left feet with myself. So that's really what I would say around that. But maybe just to ensure that we also bring in James into a conversation. So James, the conversation here this morning is that, as we know, trust is the foundation of everything, of any relationship or any business that we do. And the reason why trust is so important, in my view, is that, you know, when we don't trust one another, it's difficult for us to work with each other. Because suddenly we think you've got James, you've got this agenda, and Frank has this agenda, and it makes it difficult for us to work together towards a common goal. So for me, what I've observed from environments that have trust, and also from some of the work that one of the leading team experts in the world, Patrick Lencioni, has described, I've observed that, you know, when there's trust, what happens is when people trust one another, they're able to bring in their A game or their best ideas to the table without fear of being judged or that someone will use that against them. And so when people do that, it breeds ground for healthy conflict or healthy debate. And when healthy debate happens, when everyone feels that they are heard, even if their ideas are not chosen, but if people have got an opportunity to express themselves and hear what everyone's input is, they're able to commit to whatever resolution or outcome that is shared. So when we trust one another, we can now be able to engage in healthy debate. There's no holding back. People share their ideas and the best ideas win, and people are coming into this debate. And once that happens, people are willing to commit. And when you've got a committed team, people are not afraid to take accountability or raise their hand to say, I'm willing to lead, because not everyone wants to be part of a winning team, and more so lead a team of committed people. That's everyone's dream. And when you've got the accountability, the results then come into your business. So I think the whole concept of trust has been a timeless thing, something that's been very important. But I think there's been a notion that it's maybe impossible or almost difficult to build trust when people are working remotely. And yes, there's some truth to that. And that's why I was sharing that whole conversation about, one of the writers on Forbes who actually likened to building trust in a virtual environment or a remote environment to a long distance relationship, right? It's possible, but the pace at which the relationship involves may not be as fast as if it was in person. So the speed of gaining your team's trust, sometimes we are working with people you've never met in real life. They joined your team and they've never met you in person, so they don't really know what you look like, what your energy is like. That's difficult. Or sometimes there are people who had just joined your team and they don't know you well. That's important, but you also want to keep that trust with other people. So we're trying to share ideas to see how we can make the most of this virtual environment to preserve the trust that we already have and to build upon it slowly and patiently until everything works out. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what kind of conversation we're having.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Frank. Yeah, it resonates very well with me. The especially around the trust. When we first experienced the level 5 lockdown, it came. No one was ready for that, and the element of trust ensured that I had to believe in my staff, because we all had to go different routes and start working from home. And with that said, trust is just essential to our environment and to my team. So with that, every staff member actually felt comfortable knowing that though I'm working from home, but since my manager put trust in me, I also have the responsibility to make sure that I execute and the deliverables are met. So that trust issue was quite important during that time and even today. So yeah, I now relate to what are we discussing.
Absolutely, and you raise a very interesting thing as you talk about that, because I remember I used to have a boss that required me to ensure that, in fact, all the team members in our open office, in the name of creating an open office where there's open collaboration. The reason we had an open office was so that we could see the screens of our team members. And so imagine if you were used to micromanaging that way, when you now had to go into lockdown and people were working from home and you're not seeing them, that required a very deep level of investment in trust in them. Otherwise, what you'd start doing, which I do hear in many companies, that, you know, your manager is constantly messaging you and thinking that you're doing nothing and something, and that in itself can kill morale and everything. So I completely identify with what you're saying.
Awesome.
Okay, so we'll continue. So that element of bringing people together is still very important. Remember, you are just physically distanced, but you're still together. So make sure you bring people and unite. And in this picture, I put a picture of one of the organizations where I volunteer in, and some of the people on this camera, in fact, 1, 2, 3 people on this camera I've never met, but they feel like family. I feel like, you know, with one or at least one of them, I feel like, you know, we could actually go on a long road trip together, just because we've invested in time virtually just to get to know each other and just to do a lot with each other. And that's what you could do. Find any excuse to ensure that not all your meetings are business meetings. Create a virtual happy hour. I've also know of a company here in South Africa where they sent Uber Eats to all the employees, and they shared lunch, or people with storytelling sessions, anything that brings people together. You know, it will appear though you're not running away from anything. And when you bring people closer together, there's something about bringing people closer together that expedites the speed of trust. And that's why that is very important. The next aspect that we're going to look at, if you hadn't figured this out, we're using the acronym TRUST, but these are not conclusive. I just thought, you know what, I may have many ideas, and so to limit myself and to ensure that I'm cognizant that we're during a work day, we use an acronym. So the first one is transparency, and transparency being, you know, making sure that there's open communication and open demonstration of behavior. Then we spoke about reliability, and reliability being, you know what you're doing and I can depend on you to show up. That builds trust. Then we just spoke about unity. And now for the S in trust, it's supportive. You've got to be supportive. Your team are going through a lot. Some of your team members, in fact, there's a saying I like that a lot of HR people I've been interacting with have been saying to me, and that's the fact that we realize now that we're not just employing you, the individual, we're now employing you and the people that you live with. And we know that you're not going to be fully okay as a team member unless everything is okay around you in the environment. Previously, people could at least come to the office and escape some of the issues that are happening at home somewhat, but sometimes those issues are in your face. So sometimes you've got a child that you have at home that wants to play, right? When you demonstrate understanding as a team leader, and you almost give those people the support they need, give them the tools that they need. I always say to people, especially in this side of the world, there's nothing more frustrating than having internet data bundles, but they're not working. And so it's important that you give people the tools that they need to be able to perform. So they may be in an area where their current internet service provider is not working. Why not meet halfway and actually give them help them transition to another internet service provider that will make their job work. Why not give them some time and don't even focus on their inputs as a team, just agree on certain outputs and trust that they will do that. When you show support to each and every individual on your team, you find that they are more likely to trust you because you care for them. And there's a saying that people don't care how much you know or how much you do for them until they know how much you care. And I think you just have to be as supportive in as many ways as you can just to make that possible. And I'm going to invite Martha to the fore. Martha, from your side, in terms of being supportive, what are some of the things that you've done? And I know you're in HR. What are some of the initiatives you've seen out there being done to support employees and team members during these difficult times where people are now having to work remotely?
Morning, everyone. Frank, can you please give me like 5 minutes just to walk around my answer?
No, that's fine. That's fine. You can always contribute. Molefi, are you in a position to contribute?
Hi, Frank. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Good morning to everyone. Yes, I actually was dying to say quite a lot because because of the exposure I had. So I was a technology officer in a big company and more recently in a startup. And when you speak about transparency, reliability, especially when you get to support, you find that most leaders are wrapped around because of the pressures that they get from the top. So you make it your own problem and you forget that you've got a supporting staff. So literally, you want to carry the world on your shoulders. Am I still audible?
Yes,
and
yes.
What happens is that to a great extent, you exclude your staff altogether. And when you come to virtual working environments, that level of trust where they know exactly what is happening, what are the outcomes that are required, makes a huge impact. With the teams that I had in a big company, because I've always been a proponent of saying, I don't have to see you for you to do your work. As long as it's clear what are the outputs and deliverables, then we should be able to push forward. In fact, if you see me at your desk or in your face, then there's something wrong that you're doing. So for me, I feel that level of trust that the people that you've hired are able to do the work should come to the forefront. Of course, it doesn't exonerate the ones that have to be in the office. There's different types. We must always bear in mind. But what is important in both cases is that all the different stuff, there's an output that is expected out of them. That's what I wanted to say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you actually just raised something that that I've actually often come across. And just this Monday, we were talking about this, especially for people who are in middle management. There's pressure from the top and pressure from the bottom. And so you're almost squeezed in between. And so we ask a question, do you have a support system in the work environment? Because I know many people leave work and their partners are having to bear the full brunt of whatever it is that's happening at work. And whilst, yes, our partners will be willing to do that, it's to a certain level. And I think you need to keep it at healthy levels. And one way to do that is having people to vent to. We always say vent upwards. Find someone, a peer at your same level or someone at the top that you can vent to. Sometimes you just want to vent. You don't necessarily want anything done. Sometimes you just want, maybe there's too much pressure on you. Sometimes you can rely on your direct reports to actually take care of certain situations. So for example, I've had times where I've been a leader and a lady comes to me and they're going through certain issues. And I've got a team member with a lady who can actually support me through that. And so actually, I would be interested in doing this survey in the room. Do you guys have at least 2 or 3 people at work that you can rely on as a support system? Either these people may be direct reports, they may be at your same level, or it's a manager that you can rely on? Because I know there's some people with managers whom they cannot really talk to, but do you have a support system? Yes, okay, Elizabeth does. Yes, let's show the thumbs up. Would I be correct in assuming that Edmo, James, Martha, Molefi, Nick, you don't have quite a support system?
I do.
Oh, you do. Okay, fantastic.
You know how to do the thumbs up.
Okay, yes. Or you can use the chat box. Yes. It's important that you have it. I'm a sole business owner, but I engage myself in organizations which allow me to have company. I'm part of an entrepreneurs club, which also helps me vent to other entrepreneurs. And sometimes they also at least say to me, hey, stop venting, start finding solutions. So it's always good to have that support system. And that's when, when you're supportive towards one another, you bring everyone. It's really tied to that concept of unity. But when you are understanding, I think in this remote environment, what's more important is for you to understand your team's different circumstances, and just do your best to support them. And when they feel that support and they feel that you've got their back, you're not going to throw them under the bus, they're more willing to work for you and give you a lot more. And that's really the whole concept of being supportive. And then the last thing that I had planned for you is that, it's truth. You can see from the way this chap on the left is really looking there, you can see how much they seem to care and everything, and they're looking each other in the eye, which means that there must be some truth being shared right there. But for me, I do think that it's important that you try and sometimes you have to communicate certain things, and sometimes especially you're being put on the spot to answer certain difficult questions. I think people are not necessarily expecting you to have all the answers and have everything figured out. And I think this is something we're speaking about earlier. So try and resist the urge to lie, because truth is one of the other things. Truth in itself is naturally and traditionally always disintegrated trust at a very rapid level. And to add to this remote environment, any lie that you make, it becomes more difficult. And so it's important that you're truthful in whatever you do. You as a team leader, you may even be the CEO of your company. Just realize that, sometimes you yourself don't know what's happening. You yourself are not feeling well. I know of HR people or team leaders or managers or heads of departments that, for example, succumbed to COVID. And after recovering from COVID, after the said period, they were experiencing after effects of having some of the after effects of COVID and tedium. And just the element of being truthful and honest about how you're feeling, and sometimes about how challenging the times are, you almost draw your team in, and you allow them to be there for you and things to operate. So for me, that element of truth is certainly another very important thing in this virtual space, to try and ensure that you're giving truthful and you're being honest in everything that you do. Martha, I'll give you an opportunity to contribute now.
Okay, well, thank you. So basically, first I would like to apologize if I am going to be speaking off the track, because I remember for us when COVID came, we were an essential service. So it meant that majority of our workforce was still at work. And I think, honestly, it has been the most confusing time, especially for the employees, especially being that we had to deal with over 2,500 employees. And it was a thing of, we were also hit very badly as a production, where we had, I think, we would be reporting 70 cases per day in terms of our people getting affected. So it really meant that from an HR perspective, we really needed to find ways to support these people in different ways, especially taking into consideration that they were not all at the same level. We're dealing with, you know, our semi-skilled employees. The others were a bit specialized. Others were maybe managers, but it was just that thing of everyone was scared. Everyone was unclear, and everyone did not want to come to work, even though, you know, it was a thing of, it was essential services. So we try to support our employees in a variety of ways, where we develop initiatives, obviously geared to different different departments. The ones that were that had to work from home were mostly the people that had chronic ill, that had underlying conditions, or that were identified as a risk. And with them working at home, it also meant that they needed more attention, because we had to make sure that if you are the team, the line manager of that department, you need to be checking into these employees as often as possible. And I think the one thing that really manifested from our workplace during the COVID pandemic was that we took well-being first. Like, in terms of everything else, we really tried to prioritize the well-being of our people. Even the conversation when we were talking to them, it changed. It was not a thing of, so have you done this and stuff like that. It was a thing of, okay, guys, how can we help? How can we support you? Like, for our general workers, the ones that were always, if they conducted COVID, it meant that the company had to deploy some resources just to assist them, because we needed to make sure they are eating healthy, they are boosting their immune system, and there's someone that is constantly visiting the sites where they were kept, just to also foster that trust. And I think when we look back looking back at the many things that we did, which was mostly communication, and I believe that it does not really change whether virtually or in person. It's always just a thing of changing the way how you communicate, to show that you really want to hear how these people are doing. You want to know how you can help them. And I think that is also the one thing that was very critical in us, is that we always made sure that, is there something that we can help? How do we help you? Instead of just saying, yeah, I hope you are doing well. Even for those at home, we wanted to make sure that, are you supported in the way you are set up? Is there something that is not going well? And, you know, involving them in some of the decision makings as well, in as far as the department is concerned, so they can have like some sort of ownership. So yeah, so overall, it's just to say, during that time, I learned a lot personally as an HR practitioner, because it meant that the conversation needed to change. We needed to be a bit more empathetic in terms of what the employees were going through. And we also, from that, I think we experienced a lot of trust from our workforce, because inherently we had a lot of challenges with trust employees, just not trusting management. But what really helped us is tailoring the solution to individuals. Not to say we are getting a one-size-fits-all perspective. It was a thing of trying to know, we know our people, our fishermen are likely to want this, and our general workers are likely to want this, the administrations are likely to want this, and we created something around that. So thank you, I'm done sharing.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I think this is a beautiful story of how, you know, I mean, especially when infections arrive, I don't know if I would want to come to work. So whatever you did to get, to keep people coming to work during that time, certainly must have taken a lot in terms of winning their trust over to keep coming to work, even though the situation was tough. And I think this is exactly, I want you guys to share and to share in the environment, because like I said, and I don't want us to limit it to the aspects that I put it in the acronym. This was just so I could guide myself and allow more time for conversations. But I do believe that because of the physical distance, it makes it slightly more difficult for that trust to spread faster. And so it's important that we communicate more. We tailor our communication to the people we're doing, not a one size fits all. So that transparency needs to be elevated to another level. And then obviously we need just to be reliable. You know, if you're reliable and you are giving whatever it is that you agree with your manager or your team leader, that in itself, you know, builds trust, because already people are feeling uncomfortable not being able to be with you, and trust, and not being able to compare their work with other people in the organization. So they're also not trusting their work, and they need you to come to and you know, show support. Sometimes you show that support by validating their work, by giving them honest feedback about what you think, and by having some of these you know, tough conversations that one needs to have to make sure that everything works. So I think for me, that's one of the things that I really wanted to do. So remember, just being more transparent, being reliable, you know, fostering unity. That unity for me is very important, bringing people together. The town hall meetings that not only allow you to be more transparent and people to actually ask questions, but also people to just to vibe with one another. That's the one way they can actually learn that, you know what, we may be physically distanced, but actually we're still together. They can only start thinking that when you've done something that brings them together. And then you also need to ensure that you support them and you give them the truth, be honest. When the company is going through a difficult time, be honest, try not to lie. And especially now in the advent of social media and the internet, it's easy to corroborate some of those facts for them. And so sometimes if they discover anything you are untruthful about anything, they feel betrayed. So that's something that's very important. And so just before I invite questions and anything, I'd just like to invite Elizabeth, being the only person I haven't invited to speak. If there's something you've taken away and you'd like to add from this to this conversation about building trust, what's been your experience working with? I know you work with a lot of leaders under you that you support, and you're doing that remotely. What's been your experience with that?
Oh, sorry, I have to talk from one device and show my face on the other. Yeah, working with leaders, I'm thinking of the importance of storytelling. When you don't listen to people's stories, then you also are not able to support them. And in this specific environment, where everyone's working from home, everyone's dealing with a crisis they've never dealt with before, everyone's experiencing other things than usual. For instance, I'm struggling with a father that's terminally ill and on a different continent. How do I get to him when there are all these restrictions? How do you then, when you feel that you are frustrated, you have problems, how do you deal with the people you work with? And when you don't share your truth and they don't share their truth, then there's no way you can support one another. So even in a work environment where we want to focus only on work, only on getting results, you won't get results and you won't get a feeling of community when you don't listen to storytelling or to people's stories. I'm thinking of my son who's working for a company where they don't have the material, because that's in this current situation also difficult to import material from other countries. And now is always asked to lie about the material. Why lie? Why not just tell the truth that it's almost impossible to get the material? And then people will understand that, because you're not alone in this situation. Everyone in the whole world is dealing with the pandemic and should understand that when you share the truth, you're not trying to hide that you're not doing your work. You're trying to tell them that we are in a crisis together. And the only way we can get out of it is by telling the truth and by listening to one another and by genuinely caring for the people that we work with. Thank you, Frank.
Wow, that is beautiful. And I think you even explained truth way more clearly than I did. I think that vulnerability to get, spending time with people, sometimes have those one-on-one phone calls where you get to speak to someone and sometimes talk about some social things until you build a relationship to the point where you get to know that the person we're working with is dealing, for example, like Elizabeth said, a terminally ill father. And those are some of the things that affect, our teams and everything. And so when we build that trust, people are able to share their truth and we're able to be more supportive towards them. And that way they feel cared for and they feel that they can trust us with their talents. They can trust us with their effort and everything that we want out of them. And that's just that whole concept of truth, also in the sense of being practical. When certain things, when something isn't possible, it's not possible. There's no need to lie about it. I think those were some very good points right there. I don't know if someone has a question or a contribution to add, and it doesn't need to fit into any model. This is an open discussion in the last 7 minutes of our conversation. Okay, I'll take silence for another, but does anyone want to have some final words? Martha, please,
Yes,
please.
I just want to say thank you. This was really insightful. I have learned quite a few, and I really loved hearing from how different teams actually handled their communication with their remote, when it came to remote learning. But now I need to leave because I need to move into a class, but thank you very much. Hi,
All right.
Elizabeth. Bye.
Okay,
Also, enjoy the class. Bye.
thank you. Okay, anyone else? Does anyone want to give us some closing tips or wisdom, best practice that we can take away? Edmo, I know you spoke earlier, but just a parting shot.
Are you just trying to make sure that I'm still logged on?
That I trust you.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't know whether it's any takeaways, but definitely for me, it's this has been a useful conversation, and I'm taking away some tips that I will definitely apply with my team. And the issue of venting that you're talking about, I had a very important function at my workplace yesterday, and there were people that were misbehaving. That's the long and short of it. So in my morning meeting today, I just lost my marbles. But after that, I then tried to put my act together and also just acknowledge and appreciate their efforts despite all this. So with regards to the new situation that we're in, yeah, I had a few cases of COVID at my workplace, and thankfully none of them were fatal. But again, just going through that phase and understanding, and also asking after them during that time, I think it also helps. This circumstances made us more human, if I may put it across that way. And it's then very important that we continue with that. And I wish that we actually continue with it even beyond COVID, whatever the new normal is, to just consider each person as a human being. And if we're at work because there are certain objectives that we need to meet. But at the end of it, the bottom line is we just need to respect and need to honor each other as human beings. Thank you very much for this session. Very useful for me and very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see James is on camera. I'd assume he wants to leave us with some wisdom. Please go ahead, James.
Yeah, thanks again, Frank. So it was, the session was quite insightful for me, especially it came at a very right time, because coincidentally, I am trying to work on a culture change here at the workplace. So I understand it can be a very difficult thing, but there's some few points that I've taken from this engagement, and I'm hoping that it's going to make it easy for me to implement that change. Because when I started Matoto Technologies in 2013, I was quite happy and comfortable with how things worked. And we would go into clients, we would put on the white doctor's coats and. But now we're working with so many youngsters, and you can understand the new hairstyle, torn jeans, all stars, sneakers, and all that. So it is not something that I envisioned, and I need that to stop. So we can only achieve that through this work culture, where I'm trying to create a positive environment for everyone. It can be painful, but I am part of that change, and I'm looking forward to that successful implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining the call, and thank you to everyone who took time out of their busy day to join this session. I put my email on the chat box, or you can find me on the LinkedIn page where we met. And if you've got any further questions, feel free to reach out to me. We happen to be celebrating International Coaching Week next week. And so we are actually currently offering 7 coaching slots to the first 7 people that take it up, but I think we might have 2 slots left because the other 5 were taken already. But should you be interested, do not hesitate to email me or to inbox me on LinkedIn, and then we can chat further, and hopefully we'll meet again on a future webinar. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you a great day further and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I
Have
hope
a nice day.
I hope we'll get the recording link.
Oh, okay, yes, I'll try and upload it on YouTube, then you'll get that.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Frank. Valuable lessons again, as always.
Thank you.